once everyone is perfectly generic, then like nobody is interesting. What I'm trying to do with AI and all my tools is find insights that are unique and specific to the brand so that we can just keep differentiating and keep focusing. If you use an AI just as a whole and without kind of differentiation, then you end up kind of in that middle mass where everything aggregates in the middle, where it's like it'll be perfectly decent, it'll be generic, it'll speak to the average very well, but we want to find ways to differentiate ourselves. The value of AI is still in enabling us to make better decisions. It can give us good data, it can give us good ideas, but it's still up to us to ensure how do we implement best to reduce costs, maximize output, and overall drive profit.
Welcome to AI Marketing Pioneers, where we bring you insights from the leading minds in AI marketing. Today, we're sitting down with Curtis Howland, co-founder of Misfit Marketing, a D2C brand agency that manages over millions in ad spend across numerous high-growth brands. With an impressive track record of delivering massive customer growth for his clients, we're here to find out what's the latest with AI in media buying and where it still falls short. I'm personally really excited about this chat today. I had a couple of chats with Curtis before this podcast. He's just so full of insights and practical tips on the latest in media buying and how to actually deliver high ROAS campaigns for different channels with so many different clients in across industries. So I'm super excited. And with that, I would like to welcome Curtis and get this started. Good morning, Curtis. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk. I obviously love talking about everything marketing and e-commerce. So this is very fun to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, you told me a bit about how you've been growing your agency and the businesses that you work with. But in your words, do you mind maybe sharing a little bit about where you are, what you do, and what you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give a little bit of background of kind of how I got here, which will help explain kind of how I think about everything. Um, when I graduated, I was obviously looking for roles, and I found a job at a great company called Carpe. They sell antiperspirants for all over the body, and I was the originally I was working with Amazon, but then I was the data analyst. So very focused on how do we drive performance and understand it. Then when there was an opportunity to lead the marketing team, I took that and jumped on it. And I got to work with creative production, email SMS, design, projections, finance, like all those pieces that connect to marketing. But I started with that data analytics lens. So when I decided it was time to move on from Carpe, I had a really great media buyer who was a hedge fund analyst before this. And so I now work with him, and that's Misfit Marketing. So you've got two people here, one that used to be a data analyst, one that used to be a hedge fund analyst. And so I come at this from a very from the perspective of how do we drive to data, but I think in particular, how do we take the data and drive the P&L more than anything, not just how do we drive those interface metrics. So I'm very interested in how does marketing drive the ultimate goal of the business, not just those short-term goals.
No, that's all. That's awesome. I also um, have a lot of experience in like leveraging data in day to day D2C operations as well. I'm curious to hear more about your unique insights there. But it's really impressive how you actually translated your in-house brand experience into an agency to help so many different clients across different industries. So. Um, I'm curious, like, what does a typical day look like for you right now, and how much of it is spent managing maybe AI workflows or automations versus traditional media buying?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like this is a fun one in particular, just because there's so many interesting AI tools, and I think Manus has been all over the feeds this week of like, can you trust it? It's built by Facebook, like it's got interesting insights. It's also really expensive. Like all these critiques, these pros and cons, and I think the big question that's in our mind is like today, but also in 3 years. What is the role of a media buyer? How much is it interacting with AI and how much not? And I think it's going to develop, but I feel like right now, a lot of my goal is to run a lot of tests across different things, understand the output in the context of the business as a whole, and then figure out how to implement it going forward. So whether that's a creative test, an ad copy test, a landing page test, a test within Facebook, because all the times you test something and you think it's, you do cost caps so that you cap the cost and it doesn't actually do that, or you do highest volume to aim for highest volume. Like understanding when you test a tool, does it do what it says it's supposed to? And often not. So I think a lot of how I use AI is either aggregating data or analyzing it, or coming up with new ideas for those tests. So whether that's creative ideas of things that we could test, or places we could get new ads, taking that data and looking for insights across kind of the semantics of the ad, to see what's working. But a lot of my day is using these different AI tools, and I think the key to me is, and the reason I brought up Manus is I'm always critical of what Facebook is telling us, because they have their own goals, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the AI is not trying to cover my job just like everyone else. Like I think in particular, what I see is that Manus is going to be built to optimize towards Facebook's goals. And so where I think marketers should be sitting is taking all of these insights, all these tools that give us a lot of data, and making sure that it actually lines up with the business's goals. So the P&L at the very end, not just driving more spend towards Facebook, but actually driving more customers towards. So I think that to me is the piece that I'm trying to do whenever I have an AI tool, is make sure what we're actually optimizing for is actually the goals of the business, and that with the context I have, we do that to the best of our ability.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like, and since we first connected, like there's been so many more updates. I feel like that's pretty much sort of
Yeah,
a one
it's constant.
set of like a one demonstration of like what the real AI innovation looks like. But um, you mentioned the Manus, which was fascinating when I took a look at it over the weekend. I'm curious to hear your take on this as well. It's fascinating that they integrated that. Right into Meta, and then also based on their best practice and uh, pretty much what they share with their account reps like all the time. I feel like, but
Yeah.
based on your experience, like where is it actually doing a good job right now, and like where do you see it falling from the expectation? I think you mentioned a couple things around the real business metrics, which is always a challenge when you only rely on platform
hmm
tool. But curious whether there's been any early observations as you play around with it.
Yeah. Um, so I will say I haven't played around with it as much as others. So I think the critiques I have are more fundamental, and I also think, when an AI tool comes out, like the first iteration is normally bad, and then it gets better. And so what I was really trying to understand is like, okay, let's say it gets better, a lot of these things improve. What is 3 to 6 months from now going to look like? And I think two things always bug me about Facebook. One is they're always trying to over report. So their conversion data, they're trying to grab as many view through conversions as they can and take credit for something that, someone saw a snippet of an ad 30 days ago, then they saw something on TV, then they purchased, and like you don't deserve credit for that first one, but they're going to try. And then the second is just that like their goals and their priorities are slightly different than yours. So your goal is put money in and get a better return out, right? When you're advertising, however you do that is different for everyone. Whether you maybe have some top of funnel, maybe you have different structures, a DPA or not. Their goal is to keep people on platform and maximize revenue per minute, and they're very clear about that. Like you look at the history of Facebook, and they're to me those goals are so close that like they can get away with it. They optimize the algorithm for that. They push ads that are keeping people on platform. They incentivize it with lower CPMs and all of that. But they know that if they can just be 20% off of your goal, you'll accept it. Um, and so I think that's where a lot of the reps come in. They're pushing for impressions because Meta's trying to monetize those window shoppers, the people that don't actually ever purchase. And they do it close enough that like it does help a little bit, but not so much that they're losing out on their goals. So I think I expect Manus to have the same issues. Once they figure out all the bugs, once they get the cost down, once they get kind of systems in place that I think they will over the next 6 months. I still think they're going to be optimizing on Facebook's inflated data, and they're going to be optimizing towards Facebook goals, not yours. So I think that's where I like an external tool, and I think Manus will be helpful. I think almost certainly once people get used to it. But I think that's where external tools and understanding things like how do you bring in multi-touch attribution and really think, is this a conversion that was affected by Facebook? Is this something that was really effective? And trying to understand that a little bit outside of Facebook is really important
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
do, has been and will be.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Well, it'll be really interesting to see how they evolve over time. Like I said, like the first iteration is usually the roughest, but
Yeah.
with something like media buying itself, I think there's just so many nuances that you have to stay on top of versus like pure generic LLM based approach. So it'll be really
Hmm.
interesting to see how they push the boundaries there. Like we've been also working hard to crack the code on our end with our agents, but it's always a fascinating space to see right now, like with so many new developments. Uh, Maybe coming back
Hmm.
to your um, day to day and how you work with so many different brands right now. One thing that was really interesting to me when we first connected was the focus you have around data driven insights and how you're thinking about leveraging AI across the entire sort of a workflow. In a way, you can basically still be the sort of chip orchestrator, but using these tools almost like a surgically in areas where you find the biggest sort of gain in productivity. So, love to maybe hear a little bit more about across the entire sort of like stages of media buying, all the way from creative insights, performance insight to actual execution optimization. Can you maybe just like walk us through how you're operating and within each workflow, like how is AI being weaved in and how like where you're seeing the biggest success?
Yeah. Yeah, I think my high level thinking about this is that everyone it makes me think of the quote, like, once everyone's a superhero, nobody's a superhero in the Incredibles.
Yeah.
And I think the like LLM version of that is that, like, once everyone is perfectly generic, then like nobody is interesting. And I think so what I'm trying to do with AI and all my tools is find insights that are unique and specific to the brand so that we can just keep differentiating and keep focusing. And I think if you use an AI just as a whole and without kind of differentiation, then you end up kind of in that middle mass of where everything aggregates in the middle, where it's like it'll be perfectly decent, it'll be generic, it'll speak to the average very well, but we want to find ways to differentiate ourselves. So I think with that in mind, creative is a good place. You know, you start at the top with creative, then all the way media buying to the website. And I think with creative, it's trying to understand what are those ads that really stand out, and what are the elements. So all of our ads we will run through an AI model, tag them with different elements. We'll also transcribe them, so that way I can quickly go through and say, okay, here are the top 5 ads. What are the elements that are about each of those, or what are the transcripts showing? Are there any trends that make us really unique that nobody else has? That maybe someone said. So I'm trying to push as much variation into the creative as possible, and then use AI to aggregate and analyze a lot of that. But then I'm also trying to understand the silos. So, like, you've got multiple different personas that you may be able to speak to. And if you look at all of your ad copy, all of your CTAs, all your landing pages is one big aggregate, which an LLM might be tempted to do versus across different kind of personas in your ID, your ads, you might find something very different. So understanding, okay, this ad copy works for this person, this ad copy works for this landing page, etc. So I'm always trying to make sure the tools are looking for things that stand out, understands the funnel, but then I think third is just helpful to be able to move quickly and to run those analysis frequently. So I would say creative strategy, looking for new ideas, ad copy, looking for headlines, descriptions that stand out, landing pages, often just fact checking them, making sure they're working, finding good ads to line up with those. All of that we use AI for a lot.
Awesome. And what are some of the biggest pain points with AI, everything you do so far? Like what are the
Yeah.
biggest like areas improvements?
I think hallucinations stands out as a big one. Like I was just reading this Reddit thread about a company that they've been using this AI tool for 2.5 months, and it was hallucinating everything. And they had presented to the board. They had like all these things. And so I think I'm always trying to push models to poke and be like, "Is this fact checked? How have you researched this?" Because I think eventually, you'll all the models will have that, and maybe you have that in already. But that's I think is a big thing. Like you have to be able to trust your data, and so even just having that one loop of like, is this accurate? Tends to resolve most of them. But I think that's what I'm always very wary of is like, let me go back and make sure. And the other thing is, even when I'm doing the analysis in Google Sheets, I still have to fact check it. And whether that's making sure the sums all line up or, double checking that I have the tables correct. The same thing applies to AI. I think the other is just like distributed data. So, like what we talked about is I might move data from Facebook into an AI, and I'll move copy the landing page in, and I'll let it know the context about the business, how it's performing, and the goals, and like all of those things, and nuances about how we change. And I think what I'm excited about is when we can move all those things together. So, there's a man is maybe attempting to do that, but I think it needs to be an external tool because they're going to only focus on Facebook, and I need to be able to pull in, all the context of the conversations and everything. And I think right now that's a big gap for us that we're trying to solve for is how do I basically not function as an API for all these questions and get the data in one place that's actually accessible.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think usually the biggest challenge with high volume, high scale D2C brands with AI is there's just so much data to process across different platforms, but also your in-house transaction data and all the key data that you only look at through your own database, right? Like whether you have it on Snowflake or even different data lakes. I don't think it's it's it, it's perfectly reasonable to expect that the LLM simply can pull everything and come up with the right insights with all the right data. So, have you found any success with any specific um, tricks or tips that you've been using to leverage the even like first party data that you have? And if so, like how did you actually come about setting that up?
Yeah, I think the things that I've attempted is having kind of a like a high level processor, or like an AI as a processor at the start. And so if I ask a question, its job is not to answer it, but its job is to look at a bunch of context that I've given it and then decide, okay, what data do I actually need to pull in? And obviously for me, we work with a number of different clients. So the first step is, okay, what's the one and only client that we're looking at here to make sure no data is intermingled, and confirm that it's only looking at that group. And then within that, it's, do we need context from our calls or our Slacks or emails? Do we need Facebook performance data? Do we need internal data? Um, at that point, I would say that we don't have a good solution for it, but I think seen some semblances of like, okay, this is working. I just can't keep all the data updated and in the right place. But when I do, and I can get that, then I think it works well because I'm trying to get the total information under the token limit such that it still has, under, roughly 100 to 200,000 tokens, so it's not getting lost, kind of needle in the haystack stuff. Um, and then I think the other thing that I found really helpful is giving an AI the ability to write SQL, so that it can query databases instead of asking an LLM to try to do math, which it's good at until you give it thousands or millions of rows. And so I think that piece of like, how do you get the right data in, segmented well, and give it the ability to do math and know when to do the math? And I think I'm starting to see the semblances of like, okay, this is working, but it's the keeping up the infrastructure that is really challenging to me now.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of the actual creative analysis and creative process in general, um, you talked briefly about how you've been using creative um, um, transcripts or even the tags to come up with the right insights there. Can you maybe share a little bit more about how you're currently using AI in the general creative process? Like, how are you analyzing different creative angles and performance, and also potentially working with your clients to come up with the right creative in that angle? And how do you actually sort of tighten up that feedback loop to make sure you have creatives that continue to perform without much fatigue?
Yeah, yeah, because I think this will be more and more true. But like you launch Facebook ads, and on average, they're going to fatigue by 25% in the following month, and it just you have to replace basically a quarter of your ads every month if you just want to stay flat. Some brands are way more than that, some are less, but roughly. And so I think my goal is how do we replace those well while expanding the business and diversifying the audience at the same time. So every ad that we get goes in, it gets transcribed, tagged with a bunch of different elements, and those are different categories. So I'll tag things like, well, what type of ad is this? Is it UGC? Is it a founder interview? Is it a podcast? Is it on the street? I'll tag things like, what's the key selling point? So is it, for example, if it's toothpaste, is it whiter teeth, better breath, a combo of those, etc. Who's in it? Is it multiple people? Is it one? What's the setting, the context? Basically, any variable that I think might be important, I'll have a category for it and tag it. So then I can go and see, okay, if we want to look, we'll take the top two most important variables. Let's say it's what the pain point is and what the format is. We can build out a grid and say, okay, this week we launched two ads that are focused on whitening and, sorry, what did I say? Pain point and, um, or selling point. So, or no, I lost what I was saying now. Pain patent format. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So we launched two ads that were whitening and UGC, two ads that were whitening founder, two ads that were whitening and focused on or on the street interviews. And so then we can ensure we have a diversity of ads across that kind of grid. And that grid could be whatever your most important elements are or multiple. But I think by it can be tempting to do two things. One is you've got a great ad and let's just do more of those over and over and over, and you just fill up one of those small grids and then you end up fatiguing your ads really quickly because Facebook sees them all the same and they can push the same audience. Or you do the opposite and you're just like, every ad is new and I'm just going to make new ads. Don't look at the data. And I think what's helpful is if you've got this tagging system and you understand the elements, you can look at your ads as a whole from a high level and say, okay, I know where my gaps are. I know what's worked in the past. I know, okay, this worked in the past. It's starting to fatigue. Let's fill in that gap. And having a plan overall of how many ads do I need, but also how to keep them diversified, how to keep them data driven, is where I think AI can be really helpful. Because otherwise, you have to rely on tagging those very carefully, and that can run into all kinds of issues because your tagging system gets outdated as soon as you find a new angle or concept that you want to lean into, and you never want your systems to stop you from scaling.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think that's maybe where your co-founder's background also maybe helps here as well. Like I know your co-founder comes from a hedge fund um, background, and like he basically also likes to stay hands-on with budgets for the ads. So maybe can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys are actually drawing the line between what AI should handle and what a human should own, and where do you see the biggest opportunity with your current workflow from that standpoint as well?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think to me the value of AI is still in enabling us to make better decisions. And I think as it stands, it can give us good data, it can give us good ideas, but it's still up to us to ensure how do we implement best to reduce costs, maximize output, and overall drive profit. And so I always think of it as kind of like just it makes me more effective at everything I do, but it's still up to me to make that final decision. Um, and Tim feels very similarly. He he likes to make the final budget change on every ad, and I think the primary reason is because it's he wants to be able to make the change and see what happens, and so he's building this constant feedback loop of when I do this, this happens, instead of trying to do some generic algorithm that makes the decisions because Facebook can be so finicky and sometimes certain ads don't perform the way other ads do. So he can understand the nuance of what are the variables that actually matter and which ones don't. The I think the time when I would feel comfortable with an AI media buying is the time when it understands all of those pieces and principles of which ads might scale faster than others, which ones might fatigue faster than others, which ads maybe are more important. They're more like, for example, maybe more top of funnel versus bottom of funnel than their click through conversion would say otherwise, even with an MTA. And so I think that's important. And then on the creative strategy side, I think the AI can pull out really good insights, but it only has so much context about what makes us different, what makes the brand unique, how we compete against other people, what lines we want to cross, how conversion focused do we want to be or not. Um, and I think those are the times again where it can come up with a lot of really good ideas much faster than I can. It could spit out 100 ads before I finish the sentence, but it's up to me to ensure that we're again balancing testing costs and output. So huge, I'm a huge fan. I think if you did every idea an AI gave you, you would end up with a ton of test spend and um, not consistent growth.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And it's really interesting because for my last job at Open Store, which is a Shopify aggregator, my team was managing more than 50, 50 D2C brands all at the same time with six
Oh,
people. And
wow.
that basically forced us to think about how to leverage technology and engineering in everything we do. And we did
Hmm.
have a bunch of awesome um, data scientists coming from a quant fund, and we also had like a bunch of interesting insights there. We definitely made a lot of progress back then, but then the biggest challenge for my team was AI only knows as much as uh, the actual data you give is good enough. And there was also a lot of sort of almost like a sort of like a tribal knowledge from the marketing operators in terms of like why do we have to do like a 15% off during this period versus this period? And what was the actual seasonality? And was the seasonality different this year versus last year?
Hmm.
And like on top of all the different format variations and the nuances from creatives themselves. So like that was actually one of the biggest challenges. But it sounds like your team is like very deep into the weeds with the data and make sure you're verifying every single detail rather than having it AI actually give you the recommendations or even the decisioning itself, which is kind of tricky.
Yeah, but I think to your point, like it's you've got like high level context, seasonalities, like competitors, et cetera. Then you've got kind of middle context of is the data accurate? What's the other
Mhm.
context of the data? Like things that aren't in the numbers, and then you just have the numbers. And I do think like the AI progression will reverse up that as like for pure like budget changes, as long as it's operating on the right context, that's easier. And then it's that middle that gets a little bit harder, and then the biggest that is the kind of last nut that'll be cracked, I think. But that's interesting to hear about open store and how I mean, because that's a lean team to be running 50 different brands.
Yeah.
I know you guys had some
It's
pretty
huge.
big ones there too.
Yeah, yeah, and it was constant iteration with different operating models and the actual engineering models as well. And we basically implemented a bunch of interesting ad automation techniques, which actually gave me a lot of inspirations in thinking about how to leverage technology in D2C
Mhm.
operations. But also at the same time, back then this was like pre Cloud Code, pre Cursor
Yeah.
even. So there were a lot of limitations in terms of how to actually make AI be more proactive or even execute on behalf of humans with the right data. Um,
Mhm.
which is really interesting because like what we try to do here at Enrich Labs right now, it's basically built on top of all the learnings that I personally had from that experience of running 50 different brands, but
Yeah.
kind of thinking about how can we actually reimagine the entire operation with the latest technology that's available right now. Like how do you actually bring in the cloud code or open cloud like experience to the entire experience of media buying, and how does that actually work in practice? So it's been
Yeah.
a fascinating challenge, and I think we're making quite a lot of progress here. Um, but
Which which
yeah,
area do you think you've made the furthest into the strategy? Is like from a pure data analysis into like actually being strategically effective? What category do you think you've made the most progress on?
yeah. So a couple of things I would say. One is definitely data synthesis, and how do you come up with the right insights that are not hallucinated. And we basically have been training our agents to be specific about the insights and also even the way it handles data. I've been actually pushing the agents to look at the data with better context versus generic LLM context, which
Mhm.
makes the output miles better. And then the second piece is around more around the actual proactiveness and doing the execution for you in the background. So previously, we didn't have the luxury to even have these agents to work for you while you sleep. But
Yeah.
right now, like the tedious tasks, like, hey, can I get actually notified of like massive spend spike on Google or Meta, and at that point, can we actually get more context around what was happening? And in some cases, can you actually put safeguards
Mhm.
to basically avoid that from happening and make the adjustment? Um, and then consistent feedback loop, like every morning, you run the sub-exact type of report that you need from your accounts based on your preference, and then the agent will basically run the job and come back to you with the insights.
Mm.
And the next stage we're actually pushing towards right now is based on that. Can we actually implement a sort of a self-improving feedback loop that the agent can continuously improve the campaign performance and also its decisioning logic based on the data? And that's actually one of the more interesting avenues that we've been exploring a lot. But all of this was never possible, not even like last year, I think. But like with
Yeah.
everything that's happening in AI, it's moving very fast. And Manus is a great example where like these agents are coming directly from different platforms to, but also at the same time, it really depends on the context and the type of data that you feed into, and the actual, I would say, operator experience that needs to be translated into the agent experience. That makes a
Yeah.
big difference because anybody can basically connect to MCP, anybody can basically connect to API, but
Yeah.
the real difference here is how do you actually ensure um, the agent is doing the right job and actually delivering results versus just some generic LLM stuff that's just decent at best. So that's
Yeah.
been my observation, and it's been fascinating.
Yeah, I'd be curious. So with your experience, and I feel like all operators have, different like this is the most important thing. Like if you tell me what's the most important variable in ads, I'm going to tell you authenticity. Like that's my word when it comes to
Yes.
ads and media buying. And I'm going to say it's a quant focus. I'd love to hear like if you were to pick one of your kind of like focuses, like one problem you're trying to solve with AI, what is the context that you're pushing in? And you mentioned this earlier that you're pushing the models to make decisions with the right context. I'd be curious to hear what it is specifically from your perspective or
Yeah.
experience.
So it could be as simple as um, even giving the model the best ad samples that you have, or even the best creatives that you had from the actual data. and asking the model to synthesize the learnings from that specific data set and come up with the right insights that you can test it out yourself. So rather than like asking the model, hey, what are the three creative angles that I should be testing for this brand X today? Like I would even try to begin with the sort of data, existing data, and the best practice that you have accumulated from your own knowledge base from relevant brands, and then off of
Mhm.
that, basically give it to the model and have it synthesize and research the patterns and the insights, and off of that, come up with the insights that you can apply to your actual execution, which is basically more about anchoring the model behavior
Mm.
versus letting the model decide off of the sort of ginormous training data set that it has, or even when it's tempted to do the web search, it's just so much of stuff out there. It doesn't know what's actually reliable and good
Mhm.
quality content. So from that standpoint, especially for folks like you or Eve, or you're like a co-founder with so much insight around what's been working and what you know for sure from your experience that's working, how much of that data can you actually fit directly into the model and let it
Mhm.
replicate the same patterns and the insights that you found on top of all the new findings that it can generate for you from different insights. So um, that's been actually giving us like outputs that are like miles better, and
Yeah.
it's been just fascinating to watch everything evolve with the latest models as well.
Yeah. So this is a weird question that you may know, and this is a tangent, so I apologize. The current models have, mostly like a couple 100,000 tokens of context window. You have some that go up to 10 million, but like realistically and functionally, they're constrained at, a couple 100,000 before the needle in the haystack problem starts to really appear.
Mm.
Do you know how much context, how many tokens a human has in theory, or if anyone's ever tried to estimate that? Especially when thinking about like how much information we have in our brains and the ability to use it effectively for our decision making versus an AI and how they're constrained.
That's a good question. I would say it's I think humans operate differently with the active use of
Mm.
memory and
Yeah.
how we process new information and how we make decisions off of it so dynamically. Um, Maybe at a sort of like absolute given moment when we make decisions, maybe the absolute amount of tokens that we can process like right away should be much higher than LLMs at this point, I think. Because
Mm.
LLMs can like do can process like so many more tokens and information like at the speed of light in a way.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, when you think about the intuition and the sort of decisions that you get to make as a human without even processing information logically, I think
Yeah.
that basically gives a human the superpower in making these big decisions. And sometimes it's when you notice that something's not quite right, and then like that instinct kind of pushes you to like dig deeper and find the root cause. And I think that's basically the bigger challenge these models will eventually have to solve. But from the absolute amount of tokens that the models consume versus human, like I mean, like it's not a not a game at this point. But I think it's just more around how we operate differently as a human with so many different dimensions in our brain.
Yeah. No, that's a good point because I mean, if I think about like how much do I use on a certain context, and I think about how many words go through my mind, and if I tried to, even if I just like at the most extreme assumptions of like, it's probably less than 10,000 tokens, like
Yes.
for a really complex thought, probably far less than that, and versus the multiples of that. And I think you're right that AIs, they're really good at precision, and it's that intuition of like when do I fact check and when do I question and when do I bring it and how do I know what to trust that I feel like
Yes.
they're missing right now of yeah, when you do a query and you have to be like, okay, pull from this place or with this time context or with this understanding or analyze this with this judgment or and I think yeah, I wonder have you thought about that at all as you're building models? Like, is there a way to build in intuition or like that underlying like gut? Because there's the like functional processing, which is robust, but it's that like when do you fact check yourself? When do you question? When do you repoll something or check it a different way?
Yeah.
Has have you thought about that?
We are actually exploring more noble ways to have the agents to be more proactive about this.
Hmm.
That's in the form of inviting humans to kind of work with the agent, like by asking questions and follow up questions off of the data, and even asking the agent to ask itself. Um, to kind of self-assess and improve based on its assessment,
Yeah.
which like surprisingly gives us a lot of interesting new insights that we even didn't think about.
Mm.
I don't think it can completely mimic the human intuition and creativity
Yeah.
per se, but the way we've been designing our agents has been around how do we actually build out an amazing user experience that all the human users can um, view agents as the pretty much like a 10x force multiplier for everything they do on top of their existing workflows, rather than simply having the agents to do everything we do
Hmm.
and expect that it will like outperform on every single dimension, which I don't think is going to be realistic. That actually brings me to my next question, which was, you know, based on your observation and experience so far, from media buying standpoint, like what would it look like in the next 3 to 5 years? Like when you think about media buying itself, like what
Hmm.
will it look like in 5 years with AI? Where do you see humans still adding the most value, and where do you see AI maybe capturing most of the value in media buying?
Yeah. I yeah, so I have a thesis that the only thing AIs won't be able to do is be human, at the end of the day, and I think a lot of that will just come from, small improvements, better models, better systems, better tools, better integrations, better data warehousing, but I'm not of the mindset that like there's something like that AI will fundamentally be capped at outside of being human. And so I think when we think about building brands, when we think about building companies that people want to buy from, I think this is already true with ads and building brands and everything, or just building companies, building ecosystems, building connections. Um, but I think what's true currently is that people really want to connect with people, and even like doing therapy or connection. I think there'll be some AI elements to that, but I think ultimately there will be just some element if I want to talk to a person because that's important, and um, I know that like some other person is giving time for me and to do this well. So bringing all that back down to ads and brands, I think the ads that I'm seeing doing better and better are the ones where the founders are getting in front of the camera. The team is getting in front of the camera. They're having fun. They're doing things that are engaging. Like they're still using best practices. These are not top of funnel. They're driving conversions. But like these are real people that you're starting to get familiar with. You're seeing them over and over, and they're doing different ads in different formats. And I think that's working really well. Then I think there will be there'll be elements of I think well honestly I think that's the biggest thing. It's just like people want to buy from people, from ads that are real people, from companies that are real people, etc. How it'll affect media buying, I think, is that companies will want someone that understands the what's going on. So I think media buyers' job won't be to go in and change budgets or tweak things. Because I think eventually you'll have a model that has all the context and all the information, and it can think about each decision strategically. Of okay, I know this ad is top of funnel. It's long, multi-touch attribution says this. Its 28-day window says this. Its 7-day window says this. The business is doing Y. That it's out of stock here. Like I want, it'll have all of that eventually. But I think the media buyer's job will be to understand. Okay, what are the inputs that we've given? What is the AI doing? When would we want to change it to a more aggressive AI model, a less aggressive, and just having someone real that the business can interact with again to do that job, to figure out when do we layer on more tools and more capacity, when do we not do that. And I think much like the people in the ads, like yes, you can just make an AI person in an ad, but I think there will be something compelling about working with a real person from that perspective. So it's not super optimistic from a skill base, but I do think um, I one other like caveat. There's a great YouTube video called "Humans Need Not Apply" by GCP Gray, and he goes through and kind of talks about how a lot of things will be automated. And at the end, he makes the argument that not everyone can be artists, and I think that's where I disagree with the video. And I think ultimately I've seen that as more and more of the world gets automated just through coding process like factories, more and more people are artists. You think you've got more influencers, more like online creators, you've got more people that are chefs, more people that are what babysitters, whatever that is, like the proportion of the population that's not output producing directly and does something that's more artistic and engaging, I think has gone up and up. And I think that'll be true as well for AI, and I think the same kind of applies within companies. Of like, I think companies will become more of an art, and AI will do the heavy lifting of the numbers and the processing.
That's super interesting, and it's also similar to how I've been viewing the evolution in this space as well. Um, I think it's gonna be really interesting to see, especially over the next 3 to 5 years, and how companies actually reinvent the existing workflows
Yeah.
to identify which ones need to be purely AI driven and which ones need to be still purely human driven. I think the
Hmm.
actual distinction will get slightly vague, and how much emphasis you put on each will definitely change. But
Yeah.
ultimately, when everyone adopts AI across creative generation or even process management and optimization, like you said, like the real game is about how you can actually deliver sustainable and meaningful business impact
Hmm.
through everything you do, and ultimately comes down to the humans that you talk to as your customers. Like, how do they actually perceive what you're doing, and how can you actually deliver um, excitement and the emotional connection, which is fundamental to any marketing activity. So I think that's going to be the biggest mode that you can build as a brand. But yeah, I think it's going to be a interesting time to leap through, and um, maybe as you think about the evolution and like everything that we've been discussing today, if you were to talk to any head of marketing or CMOs of a D2C brand, um, like what would your like top three advices would be today?
No, CMO of a D2C brand. I feel like, I think it would depend on where they're sitting at, because I think there is there's I talked to a lot of CMOs from doing $1 million a year to doing $1 billion a year. I see a pretty wide range of companies, and their revenue correlates with sophistication, but not always. There's definitely outliers, and I think the first thing is always like fundamentally understand your customers. Like, what do they want? Why are they buying? How do you speak to that better? Without that, you can't do anything else. But you also have to understand, your P and L and your business. Like, I think those are the two fundamentals. Then from there, I feel like the next layer is understanding like the in between. So you've got your P and L and your customers, and then you got the actual like ad production. And I think in between is the how do you know which ads are working? How do you know how many ads to produce? How do you know which ads to build on? And having that framework and diversity. And I think that more and more I'm seeing is important. And a lot of the bigger brands, like 100 million plus that I talk to, their heads of marketing, um, they've got that framework down and they're well optimized. And what they're leaning for now is understanding where where are things the data what are things the data couldn't tell us, like this ad is more top of funnel, it's building your awareness for 6 months from now, while driving conversions. Let's optimize for that. And I think those frameworks are really helpful for that. Yeah, and I think the businesses that have the basics and they get those down, they have good media buying, they have creative, and then they figure out how to get outside of the data and find those insights that are outside of that are the ones that are really succeeding and growing. And again, they know their customers well, and they're set up for success, but then they're pushing the edge. Um, yeah, and then I'll be curious to see what like a team of $100 million company looks like in 5 years, because I'm sure it'll have a lot of AI, but I also think it'll still have a lot of real people that are figuring out how to resonate to other real people. Because ultimately, like, this is not a game of selling stuff on Facebook. This is a game of creating a product and selling it to real people. And the Facebook, the ads, everything else is just in between. That's just the operations. And I think when you forget that connection, you could mess up by focusing too much on the middle.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. Um, cool. I know we're pretty much the time right now. My last question before we leave is, in terms of AI in media buying and AI implementation for D2C brands, like what's the recommendation you have for any D2C operator right now in kind of exploring different tools and thinking about the best way to use AI in their day to day?
Yeah. So I'm a little bit biased because I do media buying. But I think I also believe that like Tim and I are one of the most effective media buying teams out there, because just of the simple truth that like we haven't um, pushed the media buying to a bunch of juniors, and so we are in every account focused on that. And so I think when I think about media buying, I think the mistake I see often is trying to automate it too early instead of first understanding what's going on. So I feel like when thinking about automating anything, media buying or whatever, I think the first is really understand the process, make sure you understand the steps, what is necessary, what is not. Um, then ideally simplify it first to make sure you're focused on something that's simple, the goal, and then you automate. And I think in that setting, you can do it well. So if you're thinking about automating and you're a small team and you have to do it, go for it. But I also think if you're a big team, make sure you have someone that really understands what's going on and have them manage the automation. They'll be able to do more. They'll be able to own more. But just don't make the mistake of automating something you don't understand, because then it's going to push for something. And maybe that's having someone that you trust, that you say, okay, we've hired them and they understand, or it's a tool that you've looked at and you say, okay, this person understands. But I think that's the always my kind of question there. And I realize on your side, is there? I guess what I want to ask, and I know we're coming up on time, is like, are there situations where you feel like no, like the tools are good enough that the automation can take over either size of company or simplicity? And then on the kind of to my point, are there any companies where you say no, like you should obviously push for automation? It's efficient, it's quick, but you need to have someone still managing it.
Yeah, I mean, like it really comes down to the scale. And if you're running a business that's doing 10 million plus in ad spend every year, or even less than that, um, it's absolutely critical to have humans in the loop to actually make sure you're working with the right data and the right insights and kind of battle test it. If you're much smaller scale merchant or brands that are just trying to get your word out and test different channels and how to actually scale, probably you have more room to give AI to test
Mhm.
things out and see if it can actually find the angles or ways to scale it. But in any case, our approach and our belief has been fundamentally about, these agents are here to augment human operators, not to completely replace them in any way. So, in a way, the way we view it is, if we were to scale our marketing operations 10x with more contractors or more teammates. Um, what are some of the things that we see as the biggest opportunity with more reliability and like almost like a deterministic output from these models? And then try to spin up agents that can help us with the tedious part of the process, so that we can basically do have 90% of the repetitive work in the existing workflow carried out by reliable AI agents, and try to sort of expand the portion where we do the strategic work in identifying the right hypothesis and new angles to test, or even new ways of selling products with actual human input. So it really comes down to the scale at you're at, and and like how sophisticated you are with the overall workflow. Um, so yeah, like hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, cool. Well, this has been so much fun, and
Yeah.
thanks, Curtis, again for jumping on the show. I'm sure our listeners really enjoyed the show today. Uh, what's the best way to reach out to you if there are folks interested in chatting with you for all the awesome D2C media buying insights?
Yeah, absolutely. I post on LinkedIn every day, and then I post on my Substack once a week. So my LinkedIn is Curtis Howland, my Substack is Curtis Howland, and then both of those have links to my calendar, and it's also on our website at misfitmarketing.co.
Awesome. I'm sure many of our listeners would be interested in chatting with you after this episode. Well, thanks again, and thanks to everyone for tuning in today. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite platforms. And until next time, see you. Bye.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to AI Marketing Pioneers. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Stay tuned for the next episode where we bring you insights from the leading minds in AI marketing.